every reaction on the opening weekend is maybe an overreaction, but hey, we're going to have some reactions and or overreactions to opening weekend baseball here with Sara Sanchez right after this. Welcome, everybody, to the Easter Sunday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast, sponsored by Fantrax. Happy Easter to those who celebrate. Happy baseball season to those who celebrate that one. And Sara Sanchez is here, our guest today. Very excited to have Sara on board to talk about the opening weekend of baseball. Sara, are all your players with 0 ERAs and on pace for 162 homers, 300 steals? Everything going great?
It's going. I'm a Cubs fan, so the Justin Steele injury kind of hit me at my core. I could barely sleep that night, but it's so early. Some of my guys are absolutely crushing it. If you took Christopher Morel in drafts, like I've been telling you to all draft season, you are having a good one. He hit an absolute line shot of a home run off a John Gray slider earlier today, which was definitely pretty. And he was hitting 444 before that. So, Christopher Morel season is here, y'all. We'll jump into it. It's the time of year where we can overreact to small sample sizes, and that's one of my favorite things to do.
Yeah, and there's kind of no other topic that I could have had for today because, like I said, everything that you react to at this point is to a certain extent an overreaction. They're going to do all this 159 more times. The numbers and the performances that have happened so far are real. But, we all know there's a lot more to come. But also, what else are we going to do talk about the games which have happened so far? So mostly on today's show, we're going to be talking about some exciting first starts and first saves. And we know that, we're not necessarily going to get 30 more starts that are the same, but we're going to try to figure out how much we can read into these initial performances. But first, we've also got some headlines to talk about. Thankfully, no major injuries in the last 24 hours, as far as I can tell. We even got some players coming back from injury. Rafael Devers missed a couple games with just minor shoulder soreness, but he's back already. So I think we don't really have to worry about that. When you see guys missing time in the opening series, but as long as none of the words are too bad, do you really care at all? Or is this basically just extended spring training for some guys?
Yeah, it doesn't bother me too much unless there's something that is attached to it or something we know was going on with it. In the case of Devers, it was unfortunate because I had to bench my starting third baseman in a couple of daily lineup leagues. But until I hear more from the Red Sox, I'm not terribly worried about anything like that. There's another guy we're going to talk about here. Similar situation, Bryce Harper. I think, him sitting after it kind of crashing into that well yesterday had people catching their breath a little bit. But I was listening to the Phillies game earlier today. I know you're a Phillies fan. They said it was just a scheduled day off and everybody should chill. So I'm going to chill until I'm told otherwise.
Yeah, that seems to be the case with Bryce Harper. If you get a chance to watch the clip, it looks rather scary, but also a little bit funny in that there's a camera angle where the ball it actually hits off the netting. So you see Bryce Harper fully upside down, and then a second or two later, you see the ball hit about 10 feet behind him. It looks real bad, but of course, he would have caught it if not for that darn net. But good thing to hear that he is probably okay. If you guys were not sure whether or not they're okay, back with the Red Sox, Kenley Jansen was unavailable yesterday with back tightness and uncertain today if the Red Sox get a save. Veteran closer who doesn't exactly stay healthy all year. So if you drafted him, this one might be a worry or no?
I think it's a worry, but I think it's a worry you were baking in. There's a reason that Jansen was going so much later than some of the other established closers. And it is this, right? Like we know he is going to miss time throughout the season. We know he has moments where he's a little bit less than reliable. The discounts on Jansen and another guy who went in sort of similar spots, Craig Kimbrell, are baked in uncertainty because we have seen this movie from them before. And so again, until the Red Sox say that he's going on the IL or something bigger is going on here, you're just going to kind of write it out with Kenley Jansen. Not a terrible, you're probably speculating on the waiver wire for a closer anyway if Jansen's your top closer. So I don't think this changes very much.
Yeah, that's a good point. And at least this is a good week to be speculating on closers. I talked about a whole bunch of save specs with Ryan Boyer on the Saturday Fab edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball podcast. For anybody interested, tons of bullpens out there, including some we will get to in our overreaction section. Just a couple more headlines to touch on first. Back spasms for a few players. Bo Bichette scratched today, Sunday, with back spasms, but I don't think there's long-term concern there yet. Maybe, though, more with Mitch Garver out for the second straight game with back spasms. And just because it's Mitch Garver, he doesn't tend to stay healthy all season. You don't really want to see him already in March dealing with anything, even if it's minor.
Totally agree with you on Mitch Garver. I have him in a one catcher league, and I was already considering replacing him just because the names on the waiver wire are pretty good. And the whole point with Mitch Garver moving to DH all the time instead of catching all the time was that it was supposed to keep him healthier, and that does not appear to be the case so far. So that one I might be a little bit more worried about than some of these other guys that we've got on the list. But again, that's a one catcher league. I doubt you're dropping Mitch Garver for what's on the waiver wire in a two catcher league at this point, or at least I hope you're not.
Yeah, I think definitely wouldn't overreact to this one to keep it with the theme of today's show, but you're certainly not happy about it if you've drafted Mitch Garver. Let's talk about a interesting transaction that happened yesterday. Justin Steele did hit the injured list for your Chicago Cubs. He's going to miss about a month at least with a hamstring strain suffered while fielding a bunt. Unfortunate one there. Some confusion about what the Cubs were going to do with Justin Steele's spot because Ben Brown was called up yesterday, even though Steele's spot in the rotation wasn't due to come up for a few days. So was he up to start or was he just up to relieve? If yesterday was any indication, he was up to relieve, and it did not go well at all. What was it, 6 runs in 5 outs? What do you think is going to go on with Ben Brown and with that Cubs fifth starter spot?
Well, a couple of things here. One, Ben Brown was supposed to pitch yesterday. So I think part of the reason that they put him in relief and they left him in for that second inning after he had a great first inning was because they're trying to keep him stretched out, right? So I don't think we should read too much in to the fact that he came in relief and got hit around by the defending World Series champions to his future as whether he's starting or a middle relief option for the Cubs right now. Now, the thing that was a little bit more concerning with Brown is that it seemed like he was having trouble locating his curveball. And one of the adjustments that he made in the spring was to sort of move to more of a 2-pitch approach with his fastball and curveball and really focus in on those offerings. And so if he can't locate one of those, that's going to be problematic in the big leagues. I don't know how much of that was him being overamped. I don't know how much of that was just trying to, stay with it in a big situation. I am still interested in Ben Brown through the month of April. I don't think this is a situation where the Cubs are going to send him immediately back to AAA and try to call up Cade Horton or something like that. I think Cade Horton is going to see some MLB playing time this year, probably not until June or July. That was something that was also said on the Cubs pregame show today by Bruce Levine, who tends to have a really good finger on the pulse of what the Cubs are going to do. I also wouldn't be surprised if Ben Brown gets a start on the 3rd or 4th against a Rockies team that is just not very good. He would still be on schedule to do that. He didn't throw too many pitches yesterday or anything like that. I would be a little surprised if he got a start against the Dodgers. So I don't think he's going to take a start in that Dodgers series. I wouldn't be surprised if he winds up, if you're in a wins league, vulturing some wins off of the back of some of these 4th and 5th starter guys. At the moment, the back end of the Cubs rotation is Jordan Wicks, who is having some control issues against the Rangers as I speak. Javier Assad, who has had moments of brilliance, but frankly, second time through the order, sometimes gets hit really hard. And potentially Drew Smiley or Ben Brown. And so even if Ben Brown is the middle relief option, I think that he probably gets wins in a bunch of those situations. And I'm still interested in him for that reason. The Cubs' early schedule is brutal. So it's going to be interesting to see how they piece this together. Steele was probably the one guy they could not afford to lose.
So is this a situation where, assuming between the time we finish this show and the time your Fab run happens, if Ben Brown has not been sent down, but we also haven't heard confirmation that he is starting next week, is this a situation where you're going to try to sneak him in with a cheap bid in hopes that nobody else really wants the guy who just got lit up and isn't even a guaranteed starter?
That's kind of my plan. I mean, worst case scenario, you wind up dropping him next week because he got sent down in the interim and somebody else takes that spot. But you're not Jordan. He's no longer going to cost you like $80+ in fab. You might as well see if you can sneak him in with a cheap one.
Yeah, I think that makes sense to me. As long as it's money you could afford to part with, there's still a chance that everything breaks right and you get Ben Brown for most of the season. One more bit of news. This is hybrid between news and the main topic of the day, so we'll use this as the transition. Jared Jones looked really good in his debut for the Pirates, struck out 10 and walked 2 in 5 2/3. Did give up 3 runs against the Marlins, but only on 3 hits. I couldn't have asked for much better from Jared Jones. Did you manage to get in on the Jared Jones hype? And if not, how disappointed are you?
I did get a couple of shares of Jared Jones in fab last weekend, and I'm pretty excited about it. I think he looks legit. The stuff metrics look good. The pitcher list people are in on him. Those are sort of my go-tos to figure out, like, is this a guy that I want to drop, a decent amount of fab on, or is this a guy I'm going to take a pass on? That Pirates rotation is interesting to me, and I don't remember if you and I were talking about this at the Glarf draft or somewhere else. I think that Pirates rotation is right for people to come in and take spots there, right? Like Martin Perez, Marco Gonzalez, love you. But if Jared Jones, Paul Skeens, some of the guys who have more electric arms get it going for them, I see no reason that you're going to keep them hanging out in the minors for Martin Perez. And the Pirates schedule is the opposite of the Cubs early. They have a kind of easy landing in April. So it seems to me like a situation where if they win a few games, it incentivizes them to keep a guy like Jared Jones up, to go out and see what Paul Skeens can do with some of those limited innings that he might have early in the season. Really liked what I saw from Jones. Really happy I was able to get him in a couple of places. And if he's somehow still sitting out there on the waiver wire in one of your leagues, go pick him up now.
Yeah, if you're in one of those leagues that didn't do a preseason fab run, he's going to be out there. And after that first start, he is really going to cost quite a bit. We are going to move on to the players that we are overreacting to. But first, I want to talk to you about our sponsor, Fantrax. Fantrax is the most customizable fantasy platform in the industry, offering the greatest fantasy experience for your dynasty, keeper, redraft, and best ball leagues. Coming from another service, Fantrax makes it easy. Fantrax can import any of your current leagues and customize if needed. Fantrax offers the most in-depth player pool in the industry, including minor league players. Do you need a customizable commissioner service for your fantasy league? Fantrax offers more customization than any other platform. Waivers, categories, scoring systems, schedule. Fantrax offers custom solutions for all that and more. And it's all free. Sign up for free today and be entered to win an official MLB signed jersey from Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Simply go to fantrax.com/RotoWire and sign up today. That's fantrax.com/RotoWire. Fantrax, the home of fantasy sports. Welcome back to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. I'm Erik Halterman, joined by Sara Sanchez, and we are overreacting to the opening weekend. Or, maybe we're just reacting to it, but what else can you do? We've only got one start for all these pitchers. We could give you some very lukewarm takes, but we're going to try to, sound interested about what's happened so far. And it's up to you to judge whether we're a little bit too interested. But who is the first pitcher who's gotten you all excited so far, Sara?
Okay, we have to talk about Garrett Crochet because I am honestly just stunned that the White Sox are starting him at all. And I fully expect this to go terribly south. He has barely pitched in the last couple of seasons. He's got such a weird prospect on ramp too. Like, he basically never spent time in the minors except to rehab injuries. They kind of drafted him and immediately put him in the major leagues. We have such a small sample size here. And keep in mind, this is against the Detroit Tigers. So I understand if you're like, Sara, I don't really believe this, but opening day, Garrett Crochet, 6 innings pitched, looked really good. Like, he belonged in the starter role, and his stuff is so electric. He throws so hard. And it's one of these guys where I'm like, if he can stay healthy, and maybe you only get 60 to 80 innings from Garrett Crochet before they have to shut him down for the sake of his own good and health. But if you can get those 60 to 80 innings at the start of the season and then backfill them later with some other guys, I think there is epic potential here. I remember some of my White Sox friends being so in on Garrett Crochet when he made his debut in 2020. You're not going to believe this guy. You're going to love the stuff. And it was all on display on opening day.
Yeah, he's got the past history that would explain why somebody who would come out of, almost nowhere in terms of his past track record with that, like you said, a very high draft pick, the 11th overall draft pick in 2020. So he's supposed to be really good. And because of when he emerged in the big leagues, everything that was going on during his draft season, he's just had the weirdest possible career path up to this point. So certainly it would make sense that if he's finally getting the chance to be himself, we could see that guy who deserved to be an early pick. I guess the worry, though, like you said, is, what if we really don't get him for long at all? He's thrown 6 innings so far this year. That's nearly halfway to his innings total from last year, at least in the majors. If you look at all his innings together, it was 25 last season, 0 the year before that. So what is the reasonable ceiling? Like 15, 20 starts? What, I guess, and I know that pitching is something we got to think about in terms of short term. You got to get guys on your roster now, and there'll be somebody else later. But that's the only real concern here, is that the inning ceiling might be not just low, but incredibly low.
It is. And I want to be realistic with people on this. I mean, if you go to Fangraphs and look at Garrett Crochet's projections this season, it is all over the place, right? Like Zips has him for 54 and a third innings, all the way up to Fangraphs depth charts projecting him for 125 innings. I think that the actual answer is somewhere in the middle of those. But he could be a guy who gets you so many strikeouts during that limited amount of innings, and you're going to see the innings cap coming, right? Like you're either going to see it because, God forbid, there's an injury that pulls him out of the lineup, or you're going to see it because, hey, he's closing in on 80, and really I should try to find a different guy who can start for the rest of the season. This is one of those arms that is so electric that I would like to have him in my lineup as long as I can.
Yeah, and I think paradoxically that makes him somebody who's more interesting in a 12-team league to me than a 15-team league, because I think he's going to be good enough per start that even in the shallow leagues, I think you're going to want his starts. And in those shallower leagues, that means when he's out of the rotation, you've got somebody else coming in his place. My first starting pitcher that I am going to overreact to here, well, it's a pair of starting pitchers that I am wondering whether or not I am overreacting in opposite directions here, because Crochet is one reliever to starter convert. There's 2 other notables who have had pretty opposite first starts. Jordan Hicks looked quite good in his first start of the year. AJ Puck, who was getting, I think, much more of the hype once it became clear that he was going to be in the Marlins opening day rotation. Absolute dud for him. Did we just whiff on this? Is this just one start and it's nothing to worry about? Or were we just collectively giving all the attention to the wrong converted reliever this spring?
I've heard people who were really excited about what Hicks could do potentially here. And so I don't know that people whiffed on that as much as they're right to be skeptical, right? Like he's another guy who throws 100 plus miles per hour, who's moving to a starting role for the first time. And you kind of go look at it and you're like, he threw 61 and a third innings in the majors for St. Louis last season. He threw 65 and 2/3 for 2 teams last year. What are the Giants thinking that they can get 120 plus innings out of him as a starter? There's also the question with Hicks, at least in particular, because of the way the Giants manage their pitching, if you're in a league that depends on wins, I'm just not sure you're going to see Jordan Hicks go into the 5th all that often if they're trying to manage his innings. And so he's almost a guy I'd be more interested in if instead of starting, he had an opener in front of him and I knew he was going to get those wins with that limited innings total. But the strikeout rate looks incredible. I don't know how I feel about him in a wins league, but he looked great on opening day. I'll toss it back to you before I talk about Huck a little bit. I think that in Puck's case, we just saw it done at the start, and that happens to everyone.
Yeah, I think just adding on to what you said about Hicks, the reason that I wasn't that in on Hicks is because I wanted to hear that he was going to be following an opener, because I thought the Giants are the type of team that would do creative things like that. And I thought there was a real chance that the reason it was them who was interested in Jordan Hicks is that they're perfectly comfortable using a starter for innings 3 through 6 or 2 through 5 or whatever. And given that we weren't hearing that, I wasn't so sure. But that means that I think the most important fact from his first start wasn't his 6 strikeouts or his 0 earned runs or his 3 hits or his 1 walk. It was his 5 innings. That's not a high number, But, we know that pitchers tend to add to their innings total in starts 2 and 3 compared to the first start of the year. If this is someone we were worried was going to have a lot of 3 and 4 inning starts with 5 innings as the max, it's pretty good to see 5 in that opening day start, or first start of the season, I should say.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. I mean, I'm not sure how many 5-inning starts Jordan Hicks has in him this season, but I agree with you that the fact that he got through 5 for his first one is absolutely the stat of that first start.
And so on the puck part of this, you are not too worried, which means if people are, say, dropping him in a daily moves league after that awful first start, and you're in one of those shallower leagues, this is an opportunity and not a time to run away.
Yeah, this is something that I'm potentially interested in getting in buying the dip, as it were. But a couple of things with AJ Puck, and I'm curious what you think about this. He struggled with command a lot. There's 6 walks in that initial start. And so I wonder if that's just something he can tweak. It really didn't look like it was something he was having a problem with through spring. And so I'm hoping that was a little bit of a fluke. But I almost wonder, and I can't believe I'm about to say this, is this Pirates team just better than we're giving them credit for? Like, what if what we saw from Puck is less about what Puck can do and more about the fact that we have been sleeping on some of these Pirates guys? I mean, Connor Joe looks pretty good this season so far. O'Neal Cruz is still absolutely mashing the ball. What if the Pirates are good?
That's what I'm talking about here on our opening weekend overreactions pod. What if the Pirates are good? But no, I hear you. There's some logic there. They totally might be fine. I don't know about good, but they were hanging around at the start of last season, was it? Or was it 2 years ago? I think it was last season. And that was right. It was last season, even after O'Neal Cruz went down, and they were still okay. And there was a thought that, hey, if they're still okay in August when Cruz comes back, didn't end up happening that way. But it's not crazy, especially when you hear that, see that Ryan Weathers got lit up too. Well, not quite lit up, but didn't complete 5 innings, did not have a good first start after a very promising spring. Puck's not the only one who's having a tough time against the Pirates. Still, though, we should be prepared to cut bait, I think, quite fast. If he's got another bad outing, he was not somebody who was projected to have good command as a prospect, so maybe starting is just not going to work out for him. I think I hear you, though. Let's give him at least 1 or 2 more. We got a good overreaction in the comments here. Bailey Ober just got lit up today. Should I cut him? No, but you should tweet about Todd Zola. You should tweet Todd Zola about Bailey Ober, definitely. How about your next starting pitcher to overreact to?
Yeah, and this is a true overreaction. And I put it here mainly because I think that people are going to have these conversations, and the answer is that we should not worry about this at all. But Max Fried was like one strike that was a terrible blown strike call against, I think it was Nick Castellanos, away from escaping what ultimately wound up being a terrible outing for his first outing against the Phillies. And the Braves are an incredible team, so they came back on this one. But so far, I mean, he didn't make it out of the first inning. He did not look great after that blown strike call. Didn't get him out of the inning. He gave up 3 earned runs in 2/3 of an inning, only struck out 1, walked 3. I think that Max Fried is probably just fine, but if you got somebody in one of your leagues who's overreacting to bad luck for Max Fried, you should take advantage of that.
Yeah, definitely glad you mentioned him, because I want this overreaction show to not just be guys we are overreacting to ourselves, but also overreactions we want to avoid. And you're absolutely right that there could easily be someone in your league who does overreact to what was truly a terrible start from Max Fried. It's going to be one of the worst first starts of the year for anybody, and this is from somebody you may well have drafted as your fantasy ace. I think it's just one bad start and one bad inning, really, because the start was that short. There's no redeeming qualities to it. 3 walks against 1 strikeout. I'm not going to sit here and say that he pitched well. He wasn't hit that hard, though, so I think he's basically fine. And really, with any pitcher who has a horrible first start, the only time I think we really should overreact is if the velocity's down, right? Basically, even if a guy walks 5 batters or something like that, if his velocity's fine, I don't think we care. Is that basically how you approach it?
It is. I think you need to look more at the peripherals and what's going on with the pitcher. And this is one of the reasons that, of the starts we're going to talk about here in terms of, are they good? Are they bad? How should you react to them? The one that I might react the most to is the puck start, just because those 6 walks are glaring, right? And you mentioned the previous command issues. So there are 2 types of overreactions here. There's like, oh my gosh, a terrible thing happened, and I'm gonna punt on my second starter or my first starter or something like that. You should not do that. I got Yoshinobu Yamamoto in at like pick 48 or 50 of an OC the day before opening day because people were reacting to a bad start in Korea. He comes back against the Cardinals and throws 5 scoreless innings and strikes out a bunch of guys, right? Like Yamamoto is going to be fine. But if it is something that is an underlying concern about a previous issue, and there's a reliever we're going to talk about in a second here who I think had an issue like that. Puck, who you mentioned, has had command issues in the past. Those are things to file in your back pocket. Like, don't cut people right now. I probably wouldn't trade people just yet, but those are things to be like, oh, this is an issue that's happened before, and I've seen it. I've seen that movie before, and I'm seeing it again.
That's a great point. So it's not just the velocity that's the main one. There's also just different types of bad games. There are bad games that are just bad games, and there are bad games that are exactly the sort of bad games we hoped weren't going to happen. So certainly something to keep an eye on for everybody's first turn or 2 in the rotation. My final starter that I'm overreacting to here is Nick Pivetta. Is this the Nick Pivetta breakout? The last 7 Nick Pivetta breakouts were not indeed breakouts. And I just whiffed on this pretty much entirely because I saw the first 4 of them as a Phillies fan and have learned. You know, we learn from experience as human beings. And when we see, last 4 times I got excited about Nick Pivetta, I was wrong. I will stop myself from doing that next time. But man, Nick Pivetta last year, especially down the stretch, was getting smart people interested. Pretty much all of them like Nick Pivetta. So am I just gonna be very sad in that I bought into all of the incorrect Nick Pivetta breakouts and I'm missing the one that finally happens?
So I was real in on Nick Pivetta this season because I am one of those people that picked up Nick Pivetta, I don't know, July or August last year, and he just saved me down the stretch. I see what Nick Pivetta did against a pretty good Mariners team as a continuation of what he started last season. And this was pretty, y'all. 6 innings pitched, 10 strikeouts, only 3 hits, 1 run. I think that this is just Pivetta continuing to do Pivetta things. I would really love it if he could stay healthy for an entire season and we could see if this is the real, everything that we have expected from Nick Pivetta for years. The key there is the staying healthy part of it. I don't know that we've ever really seen him do that.
Yeah, couldn't have asked for a much better start to the year, though. Faced 21 batters, struck out 10 of them, walked none, just allowed a solo homer, 3 hits in his 6 innings. We did actually see him go 33 starts in 2022. So he's had some health at times. Not every year, but he's been able to be in the rotation all season at least once. So if he does that again, and he does it with the numbers that he was showing since the back half of last season, like you mentioned, it's going to make a lot of people very happy. I've got 3 other starting pitchers I just want to throw out real quick. Tell me whether or not you are going all in on their opening starts. Shane Bieber with a dominant first outing against Oakland. Bobby Miller with his dominant first outing against the Cardinals. And then Tarik Skubal, who handled the White Sox very handily on opening day. Any of those 3 starts getting you excited or just making you happy if you happen to have them on your team?
I'm pretty into all of these. Bieber in particular, I want to shout out because I was listening to Nick Pollock and Eno Saras on The Craft talking about how Bieber changed his grip back on his curveball and that had been something that had been messing him up last season. And whenever there's a reason that a pitcher was struggling with something and then they have fixed it and returned to form, I'm into that. Like, I think that that's an explanation that makes a ton of sense to me. So Bieber definitely in on. I was in on Skubal already. He is my SP1 in Glarf. And just seeing what he could do, admittedly, it's against a pretty terrible White Sox team, but definitely here to see more of what's going on with Skubal. I was also in on Miller. The only concern I have there is innings and the way that the Dodgers manage their pitchers. He's pretty young. I don't know how much runway he's going to get, but as long as you're okay with the fact that Bobby Miller is probably going to give you a max of 130 or 140 innings instead of like 170 or 180, like some of the other pitchers you could have gotten in that range, I think, those innings should be great.
Yeah, exciting first outings all around. I think I'm with you. Bieber's the most exciting one there. He also added velocity, went to driveline over the offseason. And so seeing that, yes, he did, in fact, carry that forward into his first start. We'll have to see him against a major league team next week. He's just gone against Oakland. But
yeah, so I see a comment here from Frank about catchers in an OBP league. There are two names that come to mind for me immediately that I just wanted to shout out here. I think Miguel Amaya is sitting on the waiver wire in a bunch of 15-teamers because people were not sure how much playing time he was going to get relative to Yan Gomes this year. He's a very high OBP catcher, and I think that split is going to be about even. He's already he's in the lineup today. He looks great. And he's going to earn playing time over the course of the season. So if he continues to hit really well, he will take playing time from Yan Gomes, who I believe is entering like his 36 or 37-year-old season. He's quite old for a catcher. So even though the Cubs really like him, you can get some really good innings from Miguel Amaya in an OBP league. And if you're looking for a guy who just hits the ball really hard, who I also think will get some opportunities, both because of injury to the Cardinals starter and because I don't think they like him behind the plate game calling all that much, it's Ivan Herrera. And I picked him up with like a last round pick in a bunch of places when I waited on catcher too long. And he's also out there in a bunch of leagues.
Yeah, I'm going to be deciding between Ivan Herrera and Travis d'Arnaud in a lot of places where I've lost my Sean Murphy. So going to be figuring out what happens there. And I appreciate that Cubs insight on Amaya as well. We're going to be talking about a Cubs reliever in just a minute when we move on to the relievers section of our overreactions. But first, I want to talk to you about Rival Fantasy. It's a new baseball season, and that means it's time for MLB DFS on Rival Fantasy. If you want to make every day draft day, try out Rival Fantasy's daily and weekly MLB Best Ball. Draft a squad for a single-day slate or an entire week of games. Play the matchups and home road splits without worrying about waiver pickups or daily roster management. Drafting isn't your thing? Rival Fantasy has Fantasy Bingo, a salary cap-free DFS game. Fill out your squad and try to complete achievements on your bingo card. Get 5 in a row or 4 in a corner to win. Then there's challenges. Pick which player will score more fantasy points in head-to-head matchups. DFS has never been easier. Go to joinrival.com/RotoWire or use code RotoWire at signup to get a free $200 deposit match plus $25 in free entries. If you're ready to play fantasy sports made for sports fans, it's time to play on Rival Fantasy. Back here on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast, Easter Sunday edition, Overreaction season edition, here with Sara Sanchez, because, hey, every reaction's an overreaction when we're 3 days into the season, including some overreactions to bullpens. I'm going to jump with mine first here because I teased it right before the break. But did Adbert Alzolay pitch himself even further out of a closing job with his blown save, was it, on opening day?
So I don't want to overreact to this, and I have Alzolay as my closer in a lot of places because I do believe in what he did last season. But going back to what I said about sometimes you're overreacting to a thing that has happened before, like you've seen that movie and you know it's bad. In Alzolay's case, when he was struggling as a starter, he was kind of like a Tanner Houck. He could not get lefties out. He had the worst splits against lefties in Major League Baseball. Dominant against righties, couldn't get lefties out. And so the thing that sort of made my heart stop a little bit about what happened in the 9th inning on opening day against the Rangers is that he comes in with a 1-run lead. It's the 9th inning. It's Travis Jankowski off the bench who has not hit a home run in like a season and a half. And Alzolay has a slider just hang up and it gets cranked for a game-tying home run. That is exactly what I don't want to see from Adbert, because I've seen the movie where he struggles against lefties before. The second part of this I didn't love, with Alzolay being one of my closers, is Hector Neris got the harder part of the Rangers lineup, right? Like, right. Adbert was supposed to come into the soft back end, like you get Jankowski, get a couple other guys, Cubs win on opening day, we're done. And he didn't do that. So I think that he's still in the mix for saves. I think Neris is also in the mix for saves. Council has been very transparent. It's one of the things I really like about the Cubs' new manager. I'm used to a Cubs front office and manager that doesn't tell you when somebody's going on the IL. Counsell with the Steele injury was like immediately like, think it's a strain, probably going on the IL. We're going to miss him a while. I was like, oh my God, this is real information from the manager within hours of an injury. He's told us he's going to mix and match saves in that Cubs bullpen. So I think Alzolay's still in the mix. I think Neris is also in the mix, and I'm glad that I have Neris in a lot of places. I also have Adbert.
Yeah, and the key phrase there, though, is in the mix. At no point did you say is maybe the closer, because it really doesn't look like there's going to be the closer, right, in Chicago. That was my interpretation once Counsell started talking about how he's going to use his relievers. The role of my relievers is to get outs. He was saying bullpens have to evolve. Maybe that means that they evolve in a way that puts one of these guys in the ninth all the time. But if Alzolay has such a gap in his skill set where he doesn't get lefties, and if Counsell is already the type of manager who's predisposed towards things like a committee. Now, it's tough to say that he's predisposed to a committee directly, because look at who he had in Milwaukee. He was using Devin Williams and Josh Hader as closers, but he's clearly a progressive, forward-thinking manager, the sort that tends to use a committee when it makes sense. So if you've got a guy who can't get lefties out, and you've got a manager who likes committees, it's probably going to be a committee, right? And if that happens, who's the guy against lefties? Because I don't think it's Drew Smyly. Is it Mark Leiter Jr. with his reverse splits?
I'm not sure I believe in the reverse splits for Mark Leiter Jr. No offense to Mark Leiter Jr. Luke Little, I think, is the lefty in the pen right now. And he does throw 98, which is interesting and potentially good. Drew Smyly, I thought, was the guy against lefties. He also had a really terrible opening day and kind of looks like he might need to start a little bit in the short term here. So I am truly, I was having heart palpitations as a Cubs fan about the back end of the bullpen the second Adbert gave up that home run. It wasn't just Adbert. Yency Almonte also got kind of hit around by the Rangers in that one. And admittedly, like, the Rangers are a really good offensive team, so I don't want to read too much into one bad blown save type of situation. But I also, if you're a Cubs fan, you don't feel good about the back end of the bullpen right now. If you've got Adbert on your staff as the guy who you were hoping was going to get 30 plus saves, you probably hope you also have Neris there too. Counsell also in that spirit of transparency from earlier said that one of the reasons he was a guy who would use that closer all the time is because he had Josh Hader and Devin Williams. And like, historically, he had guys who were leaps and bounds above other relievers. I don't know that he has that right now in Chicago until someone steps up to prove they're that dude.
Yeah, I think I am reading that situation just the same. How about your bullpen situation that you are reacting/overreacting to this weekend?
Well, let's go to the bullpen that Craig Counsell left behind. One Pete Alonso home run aside, Abner Uribe just looks unbelievably filthy. I was watching him the other day. I was just like, this is unhittable, y'all. This is 102 miles per hour with sink and a slider that plays, and it looks like he is the guy in the ninth inning. So if you were in those late drafts after Devin Williams went down and you were the person who wound up with your Uribe because Yoel Payamps was already taken, congratulations to you. It looks like you have a capital D dude closing games for the Brewers. And until he struggles with command, which he is not so far this season, I think that is his job. And that is a terrifying arm at the back end of the Milwaukee bullpen.
Yeah, 0 walks in his 2 appearances so far. So you like to see that. Obviously, just 2 innings pitched, not a very large sample for any reliever at this point. But you don't need many innings to see that a guy's stuff is just incredible. And I think that's clearly the case with Abner Uribe. And what makes him even more interesting for our fantasy purposes is that the team could not have used him more like a closer, right? In the first save of the season, first game of the season, it was Trevor McGill in the 7th and Yoel Payamps in the 8th. And then Abner Uribe got a clean 9th. And he also got a clean 9th for his second save. I believe McGill showed up in the 7th in that one, and Payamps didn't pitch. So this is exactly how you use a guy if you're using him as a true closer. I think there was every reason to believe that they wouldn't do this in Milwaukee because, at least on paper, Uribe, Payamps, and McGill all looked more or less equally interesting. I mean, my approach to them in Fab last week was put a similar number and get whichever guy people don't want. And that ended up being McGill. So I guess I lost. But I think 2 saves is already enough, right? With some of these closer situations, like say the Jason Foley one in Detroit, where he got the first save, but the team may still be using a committee. We need to see a few more saves before we know. I think 2, when the usage is this conventional, that's all you need.
Oh yeah, I think from where I sit, Uribe is the guy until somebody else is the guy. Now, could that happen at some point? Could he struggle? Yes, he did struggle with command last season. It is not out of the realm of possibility that I see 22, 23, he's so young. It is not out of the realm of possibility that a super young pitcher is going to struggle with control at some point, and Payance or McGill is going to take over that job when that happens. But at this moment in time, he's got the job. He looks great. And if you were lucky enough to get him for a lower fab bid before he demonstrated that he has the job with, as you put it, very conventional save usage, congratulations to you. I did get him in a couple of places. I'm really excited about it. It is going to cost a pretty penny in fab this weekend if you want Abner Uribe on your team.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can't assume he's going to give you even the full 3 months of saves until Williams returns. And you certainly can't assume he's going to give you 6. So that will keep the bids from being too insane, but it might not because of that closer stuff. And you got to get the closers while they're there.
Well, and one of the reasons that I have Williams in a handful of places, I had backed him up with Payance because I was anticipating that the Brewers would trade Williams this season, right?
Yeah.
Like the Brewers are one of those teams that do not let value like an established closer walk in free agency. They always trade that guy. And so I don't know what's going to happen now with the injury and how much value they'll be able to establish for Devin Williams in order to do a trade like that. But there's a non-zero chance they do still try to trade Devin Williams once he's healthy and demonstrates that he can still pitch, hopefully sometime in May or June. And if that's the case, Uribe could just be the guy going forward in Milwaukee.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think it might depend on the timing with Williams. I think other teams will probably want to see that his back works before acquiring him. But if the timing lines up, you could still easily see a way for Uribe to be the guy for the full 6 months. We're going to move on to our hitters, who we are overreacting to after this message from Vivid Seats. Finally, baseball is back this MLB season. Knock it out of the park with Vivid Seats and score great tickets to the biggest games of the year. Every fastball, every home run, and every eye-popping play of your favorite team live and in person. Plus, with Vivid Seats rewards, you can earn rewards with every single purchase. Just buy 10 tickets, then cash in your credit towards your free 11th ticket. Talk about an easy win. And here's a pro reward tip. When buying tickets for your whole group, split the bill and make progress towards your free 11th ticket even faster. From behind the dugout to the upper deck, Vivid Seats has great tickets for all the 2024 games that matter to you. Just visit vividseats.com or download the app today. Vivid Seats, experience it live. See vividseats.com/rewards for terms and conditions. With that tongue twister of an ad read out of the way, we are back to our opening weekend overreactions. We've talked about starting pitchers and bullpens. Sara, who is the hitter who you are getting carried away about this weekend?
It's Wyatt Langford. And this is partially because I've been watching him, all weekend so far with the Cubs playing the Rangers down in Texas to start the season. But we need to talk about the fact that Wyatt Langford had a remarkably hot spring, just played his way onto the Rangers. There was no question mark, right? Like that he could be sent down after what he did this spring. In his first game as a major league hitter, he basically gets intentionally walked. So now the circumstances do dictate this a little bit. It's not like he came to the plate and the Cubs were like, no, pass him. We're not going to pitch to him. But as soon as he was ahead in the count with first base open, it was one of those situations like, yeah, we're not even going to try to throw this kid a strike that he could potentially mash and make this and put the Rangers ahead. We're just going to put him on first and pray that we get a force out. That is some respect. Yeah. Craig Counsell was not messing around with letting Wyatt Langford establish himself in that moment as being that guy, right? And that tells you what other managers are thinking about what Wyatt Langford can do. He's come out hot this season so far, 400 on base percentage, The glove looks legit. I think that, and I can't believe I'm about to say this, because by the time we got to opening day, the draft price was so high. Wyatt Langford might establish himself as like a first, second round value this season, and it wouldn't stun me at all.
Yeah, and I guess that was the key thing that you have to still believe if you were going to be in on Wyatt Langford at the elevated price, which is why I didn't manage to do it. I thought, okay, this elevated draft price for Wyatt Langford, he's now going in the area he'll deserve to go in if everything works out. You know, as a rookie, if he has a very good rookie season, he'll play like a sixth rounder. I thought that was already pretty unreasonably optimistic. But I think if you were to take him there, you had to think that there was a chance that he could, like you said, finish like a first rounder, because you know, even the Wyatt Langford fans, I assume, know that there's some world in which a rookie struggles and doesn't end up coming anywhere near what you thought. You can't write that off for any rookie, and you certainly can't even after this opening weekend. But the key was, did he still have the chance to blow past even his elevated price? And as you're mentioning, based on how other teams are responding to him, they are certainly treating him like he can. And hey, he's already batting second in the Rangers lineup today. It took a day off for Corey Seager to get him there, but that's significant. I think this isn't just someone that the Rangers are easing in the back half of their lineup. This is someone that the Rangers and the rest of baseball are treating as already here.
That's absolutely right. And so I do have Wyatt Langford in a couple of spots. I did not get him in my later NFC drafts just because he was going so high in the NFBC. But yeah, I'm here for seeing what Wyatt Langford can do this weekend. I'm very glad the Cubs won't have to face him again for a little bit.
Yeah. Maybe they'll face him in the World Series. Hey, you never know.
I'd be here for it.
Yeah. With Wyatt Langford, one other fantasy point on him, because obviously for mostly we're not doing much with him. He's on a roster in every league. So we're mostly just saying, wow, he's very cool. Look at this guy. But you're decently likely to get some trade offers for Wyatt Langford, right? People are going to be really excited for this guy, and they're going to try to get him at a price before it soars even more if he has another 2 or 3 good weeks. If somebody gives you a trade offer for a guy, let's say he's a round or 2 ahead of where you drafted him, are you going to jump, or are you going to say, you know what, I want Wyatt Langford for all 6 months?
I think there's still an adjustment period coming. It is the rare rookie that doesn't have somewhat of a slump after a hot start. And I think the adjustment period is coming for Wyatt Langford. So if you have him in a league where you can make trades, you can probably sell high on Wyatt Langford right now. I'm not sure that the price is ever going to be buzzier or higher. And I would totally understand if you didn't want to and you just wanted to play it out because you felt pretty smart about drafting Wyatt Langford where you did.
Yeah, I don't think I would be actively shopping him, but if somebody does offer me something crazy, I think you should listen. There might be a week or two where those opportunities are coming in. Moving to my first hitter that I am overreacting to, not quite a super exciting rookie by any means, but Will Benson is reasonably exciting and is still fairly young, age 25. And my thing here, the reason I put him on the list, is I think he is the biggest winner of the Reds' terrible spring. It looked like it might have been all the various infielders, but all the Reds' most interesting infielders already looked like they were probably going to play. All the injuries there to Matt McLean, the suspension to Noelvi Marte, it raised the floor of some of those Reds hitters, like Elly De La Cruz. Maybe if he has 3 terrible weeks, he can still be in the lineup, whereas previously there was at least some risk that the Reds would send him down or something. But Will Benson, with TJ Friedl getting hurt, suddenly is an everyday player for the Reds. Well, at least he started against the one lefty they've faced so far, and he bats second against the righties, not Elly De La Cruz, who was batting second in the spring. It's another reason why I don't want to overreact and say he's a big winner. I'm not going to overreact to him moving down the lineup really at all. But Will Benson is a real player in a good lineup, in a great park, who's suddenly an everyday guy when it looked like he was going to be really scrapping for playing time. So what do you think about Will Benson, big winner in Cincinnati?
I think I was a year early on Will Benson because I was in on this last year, and then he kind of wound up in a platoon situation because the Reds were just so deep. And so this year I was sort of out, and I feel really terrible about that right now because I like Will Benson a lot. He has power. He can hit for average. He hit 275 last year. He had a 365 on base percentage last season. So if you're in an OBP league, he is similarly interesting there. And he sold 19 bags last year on 11 home runs and 329 plate appearances. If he is going to get a chance to play every day, that is a potentially really interesting bat. The other guy who I think is in a similar category here, and I'm interested to see what he can do as well. Jake Fraley is sitting out there on a lot of waiver wires right now. And it wasn't that long ago that he also was putting up like a 2020 pace in a great park. Both of these guys are people who I'm interested in, and I'm really sad I don't have more Benson on my teams this year.
Yeah, I like Jake Fraley as well, although should note Fraley, I think, was out of the lineup against the lefty. So far, not necessarily additional playing time, but...
One injury away. He's one injury away, Erik.
True.
Like, look where the Reds are at.
True. It's a good point. And I like you. I like Jake Fraley as a player as well. Some good power speed potential there. The only thing I want to note on Will Benson, to dull my own overreaction a little bit, he did hit 275 last year, but it was with a 230 expected batting average because he struck out over a third of the time. That strikeout rate could come down, or he could hit the ball so hard that his batting average stays respectable. But I think we're looking at a 4 category ceiling with Benson. Maybe 4.5 if he gets that batting average up. But even as a 4 category player, he's batting second against righties in that park. And that lineup is still pretty good. That's the other thing, too. They had enough depth that even with losing 3 good hitters, there's still enough good hitters around Will Benson. Should we move on to your second hitter here? Who are you overreacting to?
Okay, this is a true classic overreaction, but if you can't overreact to something like this time of the year, when are you even going to do it? Victor Scott gets the starting center field job in St. Louis due to a really unfortunate accident with Dylan Carlson in the final spring training game. Don't know how long Carlson is out, but Carlson's been kind of up and down the last couple of years. I had him on teams a couple of seasons ago when he was one of the hot people to take, and he just really has never put it all together. The injuries have kept him from being the player that we thought he could be. Victor Scott has been on base, as far as I can tell, one time, and it was an error. And he stole second so easily that I gasped on my couch. I was just like, I've never seen a player sprint the way he did, and just like, with a good catcher back there too. Like, this is against Will Smith. This is not like some guy who doesn't have a great pop time and Victor Scott is just off to the races. It was unbelievable to watch. If he can get on base at all, I think Victor Scott is going to steal 40 plus bags. Now, this is going to cost you a pretty penny in FAB. In Tout Wars last week, when we bid before the season starts, he went for 247 in my 15-team Tout Wars league. I think that number is going to be pretty standard across 15-teamers. You might get him for a little bit less than 12-teamers, but you might not, because he stole something like 94, 98 bases across the minors last year. It's just an absurd sprint speed tool. And the glove is good enough that he is going to play center field every day for the Cardinals. The only question is, can he get on base to steal bags? And if he gets on base, I think the stolen base numbers are going to be truly ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm curious now how many players have had their first career steal prior to their first career hit. That's a question for Sara Langs, maybe. It's a pretty funny stat line for Victor Scott through 3 games. His slash line, 0-0-0/0-0-0/0-0-0 with 1 steal and 1 run. He also has a 45% strikeout rate. So not answering any of the questions about his bat through those 3 games, but like you said, just potentially the fastest man in baseball, or right up there with it. And with a glove, that's going to keep him in the lineup if he can just hit at all. The question is, how many weeks is he going to have to prove that he can hit? And if it's only like 2 or 3, I guess here's my question to you. What's the minimum WRC plus Scott needs to have when the Cardinals start getting healthy again for him to stick around on the team? If he's down at like a 70, is he still there?
Well, it's an interesting question for 2 reasons. One, the guy who would be replacing him is Dylan Carlson, and I'm not entirely sure that Dylan Carlson puts up a WRC plus much over 70, True. Particularly as he's struggling with a shoulder injury. So it's like, you have to look at the replacement value there a little bit. I think Scott is a better glove than Carlson, period, at the end. I think the the sprint tool is obviously better. It's a unique tool in baseball, right? Like the only other players who are in the conversation for doing anything like what Victor Scott just did are probably like Estuary Ruiz, maybe Ellie De La Cruz, just because he is so fast. I was listening to Eno on Rates and Barrels talk about how he's from a family of sprinters, and so he like learned tricks about running and like keeping his head down and running in ways that are different than what anybody else does in Major League Baseball. So he's got like this Usain Bolt thing going on in terms of how he approaches running that is fundamentally different than other baseball players. If I'm the Cardinals, and I'm gonna not worry about that slash line a little bit until the Cardinals are facing somebody other than the Dodgers, because what a draw to get the Dodgers rotation as the first guys you have to face. If I'm the Cardinals and he's getting on base at a 250 clip, and his WRC plus is low, but he's actually kind of like this. He's like an old school 80s player, right? Like he's one of these guys who just wants to hit the ball on the ground and leg it out. Hit the ball on the ground, force them to make an error and leg it out. I mean, that's why he got on base the first time. It didn't have anything to do with, oh, this is an infield hit or anything like that. It was an error that he forced because he is so fast that he rushed the play. So he could have a 250 on base percentage and a 70 WRC plus, but actually be getting on base and making things happen enough that the glove is worth staying there. It's a weird calculus for me.
Yeah, I guess the question may end up being not the overall offensive production, but the strikeout rate. If he can just stop striking out, only 3 games, but that 45% strikeout rate, I guess that's 5 strikeouts in 11 plate appearances. That's not what you want to see. But in the minors, he had a good strikeout rate. He made good contact. He just didn't make very hard contact. So if he gets to a league average amount of contact, I think the whole picture is going to work. But certainly the floor here is that the bat just gets knocked out of his hands and he's back in the minors in a couple weeks, which is a scary situation if you are, putting a quarter of your fab dollars on there. But I understand why you might be. I'm going to get to my final hitter, but I do want to just throw in this one question from the chat. Any thoughts on Mason Miller, picked up by this commenter when Yuri Perez went down and AJ Puck just got dropped? It's not a direct switch, though, because Mason Miller might be, is a potential closer and is definitely a reliever. Well, what are your thoughts on Mason Miller?
I mean, I think this, you just nailed it. I think the question about Miller versus Puck is, what do you need? Do you need wins or do you need saves? Because they're very similar pitchers to me in terms of like the strikeout potential and in terms of the innings concerns and all of those types of things. But one of them has a shot at getting wins and one of them has a shot at getting saves. And so I would make this decision based entirely on the rest of my roster. Do you have a couple of guys who are already getting you saves? If so, maybe you stick with Puck for a bit and see if he can get you wins. Do you have a dearth of saves on your roster because you drafted a Devin Williams or you drafted a Johan Duran? Miller probably is the guy in that case.
Yeah, I think I would wait this weekend out and try to see at least one more start with Puck before making this particular decision, especially because Mason Miller, we don't even know that he is going to actually be the closer. He might just be a guy who's working in the bullpen to keep his arm healthy, and who even knows if the Athletics are going to have a single save this year. So I wouldn't be under any rush to get Mason Miller.
They're going to have at least one, maybe even 10.
One, all right.
They could have
10. That's a lot. I was going to set the over-under at 1.5.
Over-under 11.
Yeah. So there's not a lot of saves you're bidding on with Mason Miller is the big problem there, and would be why I wouldn't have much urgency. My final overreaction of the show is that Juan Soto is going to be the player I most regret not drafting on any of my teams. Now, it's hard to overreact to any really good hitters having a really good start. So maybe this is just all vibes based and we can mostly ignore it, but certainly got off to a good start in Yankee Stadium, I guess with the Yankees, I should say. They weren't at Yankee Stadium because we all saw their gray jerseys getting very much sweat through. They were in Houston for this opening series.
Okay, I'm going to talk about Juan Soto in a second, but I just have to rant about the jerseys for 1 minute, yes, because I feel like we all got our rants out about the jerseys in spring training. They are still terrible and look absolutely awful. And the only reason that there hasn't been more consistent pressure on MLB to change the jerseys is because we all already ranted about it and we all already got it out, right? And there was that whole like attempted coup at the MLB Players Association, which probably took their eye off the ball in terms of making the jerseys their cause to start the season. The jerseys are bad, y'all, and we have to put pressure on MLB to get them to go back because it's the only way they're going to change things. They're definitely going to try to ride out the storm on these cheap jerseys and hope that we don't notice.
Conspiracy theory. Fanatics is creating discord at the MLBPA to try to distract from the jerseys. Yeah, we'll see where that goes. But anyway,
I don't think there's causal connections here, but I do think they are the beneficiaries of the MLBPA being a little bit distracted.
Yes, I think that is very true. That said, back to Juan Soto, who is very good regardless of the quality of his jersey. Couldn't be getting off to much better start for the Yankees. Already has a homer, already has a game-saving outfield assist, is already seeming to be bonding with Aaron Judge, showing off his muscles, etc. Seems like he likes it with the Yankees, and it seems like he's poised to have an excellent walk year. I didn't move him up my board because of the whole walk year thing, and I'm kind of feeling after the opening weekend that did I just miss out on something here? Also, I picked him as my AL MVP when we did the RotoWire staff picks. And so if I did that, why didn't I draft him anywhere? Mostly it's because every other AL MVP favorite is an injury risk, and I just ended up on Soto. But I don't know. I think I should have had Soto on at least a couple teams.
I love Juan Soto, and I think he's going to absolutely mash this year. There was never any doubt in my mind that Juan Soto in Yankee Stadium was going to be a match made in heaven. There are some players who don't do well under those big lights and with that pressure. Juan Soto is not that guy. Juan Soto is going to thrive in that big stadium environment in a way that is going to be so fun to watch. And you nailed the thing that I am most excited about with Juan Soto over the first couple of days. We know he can hit. We know he can hit home runs. We know he hits the ball incredibly hard. When you look at the numbers for Juan Soto through his age 25 season, the names that are comps are like Ted Williams, Mickey Mantle, Mike Trout. These are the greatest hitters of all time, and it is so fun to get to watch a guy like that during our own time as fans and just see him do his thing. The question for Soto has always been the glove, and he is out there making plays that, frankly, I didn't know he could make. That play to end the game, just throwing, I don't even remember who was at the plate, throwing him out on a rope to end the game, to save a game for the Yankees, that's an incredible play. That play is more exciting than a walk-off, in my opinion, and it's Juan Soto doing it for the Yankees on opening day. That's nuts. He also had a sliding catch yesterday or the day before that was just unbelievable. Like, not the play that I expect from Juan Soto. So if he is going to be Juan Soto plus defender and 40 home run bat and eye of Ted Williams for the Yankees, oh my God, y'all. I think this is going to be a really fun ride. And I do have Juan Soto in a handful of places, in a couple of OBP leagues and in places where I was drafting like 12th through 14th this season. And bless you, Juan Soto. I'm very excited to have you on my team. Thank you so much.
Yeah, certainly after the opening weekend, I think you're going to be very happy with walk year Juan Soto. Locked in Juan Soto. Seems like he's going to be quite good for the Yankees and quite good for your teams. That's going to do it for the Easter Sunday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast, sponsored by Fantrax. Thank you, listeners and commenters, for hanging out with us on this holiday Sunday. Thank you, Sara, for giving up your time on this day as well. Anything you want to plug on your way out the door? You've got some excellent writing and a podcast that I may or may not have been on a week or two ago.
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity. It's always fun to hang out with you and talk some baseball. I am at BCB_Sara, no H on the Sara on the social media. So if you want to find my writing, my takes, Cubs writing, fantasy writing, all of that jazz, it is there. The thing I am most excited about right now, we are on episode 10 of Fantasy Feud, a new podcast over on the Pitcher List podcast network, and we're debating out the biggest issues in fantasy baseball each week. We set a clock, there are sides, pro, con, we have a moderator, and we try to get through a bunch of the issues that you might be thinking about with your teams. We had some really great draft debates early this draft season. We sort of transitioned into our hot takes and players we really believe in. Spoiler alert, if you haven't listened to the last episode, I am super in on Ceddanne Rafaela and Nelson Velasquez. One of those looking better than the other at the moment, but it's a fun show. Shelly is brilliant, and we've had some great guests on already, like Erik. So grateful you were able to join us. check it out. If you like debates and you like fantasy baseball, it's a slightly different twist on this podcasting business we all love so much.
Yeah, I recommend it. I think you got a fun one going on over there. I'm going to sneak in one more question after I let you say goodbye here. Christopher Morel, over under 5.5 homers in the Cubs home opener tomorrow.
In just one game?
Yeah, just one. You think we're going to get 6 or 7, or you think he only gives us 4 or 5?
I think he might be tapped out at 3, but you could do a lot worse than Christopher Morel on one of your teams. I know his draft cost was high this season. I think he's going to be worth every penny. That bat is unbelievable right now, y'all. And the power looks real. I mean, he almost hit a grand slam to ice the game for the Cubs the other night off David Robertson. He missed by like 1 degree of bat angle.
All right. Well, we'll see what he gives us the rest of the year. I'm sure you and I will be very excited with every Christopher Morel homer. That's going to do it today for the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Jeff and Scott will be back with the next episode tomorrow.